Right, we're going to have a panel next, and Heather Catchpole from Refraction Media, who is a science journalist, will be facilitating that panel. And Refraction Media generate a lot of content that are used on websites, magazines. The magazine that you have in your bag at the moment was compliments of Refraction Media, so that's STEM magazine on careers. There are different magazines in each of your bags because they do have the 4 different magazines, so you may want to either swap or read each other's, particularly later tonight or something. Right, so Heather, off and away. And she has treats for questions because we want lots of questions out of you in this session.
Thank you, Nat. I'd like to invite my panel to come up and join me, so Lynette and Leanne and Tara. And this is where we get to where we get to have the mic fall off. Drop the mic at the start of the panel. This is where we get to ask some questions of the panel whose story you've heard just before. And I'd like to make this as interactive as possible, hence lollies, but also because we've been really, really impressed with the questions that you've been asking so far. I have to say it's been really amazing to hear from you and to hear what your thoughts and concerns are, because obviously there's been a huge focus around women in STEM. So just briefly, why I'm here basically. I have a business, I'm a founder myself. So the gap for me is that while there's this huge interest around STEM and girls and career options now, the reality is that only about 5% of girls are going into engineering and computer science courses, and yet there's been some pretty incredible tech businesses that you've heard from today. So I think there's an opportunity to tell those real life stories, but also a really amazing opportunity for all of you who will be absolutely headhunted for incredible jobs should you choose to stick with this STEM pathway. So the gap that I'm kind of filling, I guess, is by telling these kind of inspirational stories around different careers, and I'd love to tell all of your stories because you've been so inspiring hearing from you. But also as someone who trained in journalism, I did do science, but my whole career has been as a writer, basically. There was a gap for me in not being employed by newspapers anymore to write content about these kind of stories. So I created a business which essentially does that. So I was able to fill those two, one personal gap and one business gap as well. And that's what business is about, really, is about filling those gaps. So I'd like to kick off, and then I'm going to shout out to you guys for some questions, and we'll just throw lollies to anyone who asks a question now, teachers included. So I guess just to kind of unpack a little bit about what we've learnt from you all this morning. To kind of get down to the nitty-gritty, right? It's not always easy to run a business. It's a tough choice, but it's also got a lot of amazing benefits. So just maybe as an introductory sort of question, what would be, the good, the bad and the ugly about your business? What do you love? What's been tough this year in general? I mean, I know, for example, Lynette, you had to get up at 5:30 this morning to come here, right? And thank you for doing that.
Actually, I went to bed at 2 and I got up at 4. But planes being planes, it's better to be early. Now I wish I'd stayed with you all last night. But apart from that, there is the good, the bad and the ugly. The good is if you put yourself out on the edge, you find out and you discover who you are. And you honestly are forged in the fire if you're in business, because things come at you from multiple directions. You can't, you can be a risk manager and you can scan the horizon and you can see things coming when you get a little bit more skilled, but you're always keeping balls in the air. Especially when you're a small business. Sometimes the interesting thing about starting small and then growing and then growing and then growing, it's one of those things where to get to the next level, you have to almost unlearn what you learnt to get started, if you know what I mean. So there's a lot more I can talk about, but as you progress, there's you as a technician, then you have to hire someone, and then you've got to manage people and keep the quality up, and you grow a little bit more, And then to keep them occupied and pay their wages, you've got to start selling and marketing more heavily. And every time you go to another step, there's another learning experience. So you're constantly on the move. I think the bad can be managing people, because sometimes you pick some real winners and sometimes you just don't. And it's impossible to really get to know a person under 2 years, I think. But, you know, you've just got to do your best with discovering who's right for your culture, who embraces your values. I really liked what you said about you can set the values in your own company. I think that's the key. And the ugly can be having to really sacrifice. I mean, when I was working with National Geographic, I was away almost 5 years, Kate would remember this, 3 months at a time. My kids grew from there to there while I was away. So I'd come home every 3 months for 2 weeks and I'd go back and I'd cry. But I would help them with their homework on Skype. But those are the sacrifices you make sometimes to do what you believe is the right thing for career or business.
Hi, yeah, so it's a difficult question to answer. I think the thing I like most about running a business is you get to do what you want the way you want to do it. So to be honest, that's the best thing about it. Unimpeded by things about working in a big organisation, which, as I've said, I love the university, but things are slow in big organisations. You have to battle with lots of people to get even simple things done sometimes, like update a website. The great thing about running your own business is you can just have the idea and you can be doing it 5 minutes later, and you get to create that thing. And in addition to creating the product, you get to create the team, you get to create the values. So really, there's just a real thrill in doing it exactly the way you want. The flip side of that is probably the worst thing about it, which is that you're responsible for everything. So a big organisation gives you a big safety net. If a grant doesn't come through, it's not actually your direct problem. The rest of the university sorts out some people's contracts, people's HR issues, all of that. In a small business, the buck stops with you. So when you run out of money, you're the person who would have to tell people that you've run out of money. And so far, we haven't, but it's come that close. It's come to the point where we're like, if something doesn't happen in the next 2 days, we're telling the team that they don't have jobs. Thankfully, that has not happened, but that is insanely stressful. So I think they're two flip sides of the same thing. You control everything, but you control everything when it goes wrong. So yeah, that's for me.
I second everything that these guys have said. I'd add that a really great thing about running your own business is the respect that you gain from your team, from the people around you. People respect you for being gutsy, for being risk-taking, for being bold, wearing a gazillion hats at once and managing to do it, you know, hopefully without breaking too much of a sweat. And I really get a high off of that, which is probably a character flaw, but anyway. And I think one of the downsides is that growth is good for the business, but I loved being small. I really loved being a little family that, as you said, we could just turn anything on or off on a whim and try things. And now we're starting to grow, which is fabulous. It's amazing, but it's, you know, you start to feel like a real business, which means you've got legal things and HR things and finance things and all that sort of stuff. And probably the biggest challenge that I have faced in this process is that no bank will lend you money if you own your own business. It sucks. So do it before you try and have a house and a mortgage and all that sort of heavy-duty adult stuff.
That's just crazy, isn't it? What an interesting, you know...
But it's always been like that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really amazing, you know, about business is that it takes you places where you never thought that you could possibly get to, and you've created jobs for people, and you know, created a whole journey for them in getting to places that they might have never thought that they could get to. Tara, I really love what you said about you know, creating the jobs initially for the people that you worked with, because they wanted to take something which came from research and which came from the university further, and that's not always easy to do. And yet, you know, not only did you give them a research direction, but you know, effectively a career, and then other careers.
We help them create their own job.
Yeah. And I think that that kind of job creation is, you know, one thing that's going to be really critical to our sort of future in STEM is it's going to need people to create those jobs. You know, there's a lot of jobs that are out there that are being hired for. We mentioned data science before. There's a lot of opportunity there, but there's also a need to start from the ground up and kind of find and create those jobs. So I don't know if this seems to you like a little bit daunting, because I certainly never expected to be a business person. I'd love your comments, and then I'd love you to kind of think about what your kind of questions are in terms of just maybe starting out and starting that process.
Yeah, it was, well, it's been an interesting one for me, because when I came back from the United States in 2008 and the GFC hit, there was the industry and the country took its toll anyway, the GFC, quite heavily. But I also identified that many of the universities had closed the geomatics or surveying courses. They had closed the cartography courses, and largely I was saying, and I joined CEBA and said, where are we going to find our employees if people aren't trained? You know, where are they? I mean, so I then got the job to sort of start this initiative, which was Destination Spatial. Now, you know, several years on, what I've done is I've been able to grow and turn that around, and a lot of universities are engaging once again with spatial technologies and data, geomatics and surveying. And there's a lot of jobs out there, but the problem is that a lot of companies don't give the graduates a go. So last December, I chose to step down from the chair role, and I've chosen to really promote hard in the rapid map space to win projects around the country so I can employ graduates and give them the work experience they need. And that's one of the great things you can do with your business, is that you can do good with your business, you know, and giving people the opportunity to experience, you know, their chosen career and their profession in amongst a great team is a great way to start.
Do you want to add something, Leanne?
I was just going to say exactly that. I think being so closely tied to the University of Wollongong, other than the founders and one other person, everybody else has been a grad or an intern to start with. And probably the coolest thing about that is that you get to mould them and the way they behave in an organisation. And that's where that setting your own culture thing is really important. And I can see the people that we have brought on have a completely different approach to the way that they work and the way that they socialise at work than some of the people that I graduated with too many years ago.
And I think that kind of there's a lot of need to change like that all the time. You might find that your job pathway is not necessarily set in stone. You're going to be leaping around from here to there. I'm going to kick off some questions here, and if we could just rove some mics around as well. Did I see? Oh, I'm like a bidding person there. I was like an auction. I saw someone's hand move up here. Sorry.
Just a question about growing a business. There's kind of a balance between growing a business and not growing too quickly. So how do you manage, or how did you manage, expanding your business but not growing too quickly and basically having it all fall into a big heap?
That's a great question.
It is. You want to answer?
Well, for us, it's been very organic because it's entirely bootstrapped. So we're growing as fast as we can grow by making more revenue. I think the people around me, because I've been somewhat connected to the startup industry in Australia, and a lot of the ones that grow too fast and die, the thing is they never actually had a valid business model. They took on a lot of investment but didn't actually have something that worked. And so that's why you might hear stories like that in the paper, where people sort of expand really rapidly and then collapse. It's a bit like inflation or something after the Big Bang, you know, like it's not sustained, okay, by what they're doing. For us, it hasn't happened, fingers crossed, so far. We've been growing in proportion to our product being more successful.
Australia is very, very different to the United States. We all see and hear of entrepreneurs going to the United States and getting funding, and there's venture capital, etc. It doesn't happen like that here in Australia. The risk profile's minimal. To get a loan as a woman in business is really tough. It really is. And it's insane, but it's the same as the children talking about pay equality, you know. But It frustrates me, but we've just got to, like Tara said, we grow organically, we grow responsibly, we grow sustainably, and your customers are your investors and all the bank cards. You know, your credit cards can sometimes be your investors for the gets to start up. But yeah, bootstrapping is a thrill, but it's also, it will keep you awake at night.
I think the thing is too is that willingness to change, because obviously your business, you know, 2 years down the track is not necessarily going to be what it was in the beginning, and you inevitably with that change comes people with different skills. So there's always that, you know, toss-up, isn't there, between what you needed then and what you need now and that kind of thing. I'm going to run up and just start running around like a Ellen DeGeneres and throwing, not cars, but M&Ms around. But did anyone else want to sort of ask about that starting out sort of area? Yeah.
So I've got lots of ideas for products, but I don't really have the skill set to implement them yet. How do I find people that can?
So are you at school or at uni?
Yeah.
You're at school. Okay, one of the really great things that's happening at uni and a little bit at school as well is these things called incubators. We've got one at Sydney Uni, there's one at Melbourne, and most of the main unis have them now. And that's where students can get together. Students are full of ideas. That's a great thing about being young and learning all this new stuff at uni. And they can get together with other students in business, in IT or whatever, and they can form little groups and actually start to find people who could help implement those ideas. So if you want to do it right now, you would obviously have to use the networks that you might already have through school or through your parents or through friends. But the thing where I'm seeing it happen at the moment is in these university incubators, and it's really exciting. There's so many great student ideas and that opportunity to meet people who are like you. So that's my view. As a university person, I'm a bit biased.
I would add internships, so actually going to work at a company and finding out how they worked and what the skills they needed were. So just spending some time working for a startup and being in that environment. And obviously, once startups are very clubby, right? Like once you meet one startup, you'll meet a whole bunch of other startups because they're all getting together, particularly in places like the edtech space, right? That's a very sharing space.
There's a lot of
where Tara works. They'll all get together in big groups, not really worry about their IP and just go, oh my God, how did you handle this bit? And you get a lot of that.
There's lots of talks, there's a lot of community talks that you can go to and that you'll meet other people. Again, it might not be, it depends on what you're comfortable doing yet at your age, but in another few years, there's a lot of things you can go to, community events and stuff, where you'll also meet other people who are a bit further on than you who are doing similar stuff. Yeah.
I'll just say you're actually probably not even too young to do it. I would say you probably know people around you. Depends on the nature of your product. If you've got something that's related to media, just do it. Just do it. I mean, who cares if you know how to get an ABN or whatever? You'll work it out. And
all of that's online, by the way, if you do need to get an ABN.
You're probably the most literate generation in all of that stuff, and all of us who've got all this lovely experience is fabulous, but you're way more literate in the product that you're working on. So have a go. I mean, it's usually free. Just do it.
There's some great role models, and you'll hear from Solange a little bit later on, who I guess she's only like 23 or 24 or something now, and how she started her business. There's another guy, Taj, whose last name escapes me, who had an amazingly successful business at 16. You can see Jackie's hand waving in the air there. Thanks for that awesome question, Annabelle. Jackie?
Hi, I just wanted to let you know about a newsletter that goes out every Monday by the Spark Festival. So if you look up spark.com.au, I think it is, they have a Monday newsletter that is full of free events and networking events and talks and opportunities to meet people. So jump online and get that newsletter.
Yeah, so Spark's like the kind of startup hub festival collection and stuff at the moment. Anybody else? Yeah. Jennifer's getting a workout. Just over here.
Oh. Someone here.
Hi. Right now, in I guess the scope of like
listening to other young people around me talk, everyone sort of wants to start their own business. How would you suggest like distinguishing yourself, and what challenges did you face when everyone is sort of trying to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, another great question.
Yeah. Well, the reality is the stats are that less than 1% will succeed. And the ones that do succeed are the ones that have done their research, done their homework, and understood their customer inside out and back to front. And the ones that don't succeed, even though 99% sounds like an enormous number, they're the ones that go, I reckon I've just got an idea. Yeah, I reckon I could do that. Like, there's a huge number of people who are completely naive about what it takes to make a viable product and a viable business. So if you do your homework, there's a million wonderful resources out there, but if you do your homework and you understand some of the processes you've already been introduced to, like the marketing one today, you're already light years ahead of everyone around you. And the product's great, but anyone can solve technical problems. It's really about making sure that you're solving the right technical problem for an audience that's appropriate.
Lynette?
Yeah, I was going to say nichemanship very much so. You've got to, less than 1% that succeed. I was amazed when we survived a year and then 5 years and then 10 years, and here we are sort of like 26 years down the track, and every day still like an adventure. You learn on the fly. You are forged in the fire, as I said. But then things are changing quite radically in terms of the workforce. At this stage, workforce mobility in terms of people working for organisations for short stints. This is happening a lot now. There's a lot of apps and systems like Sidekicker, so you can become a professional, be your own business, as it were. So, I'd like to think that all of you are entrepreneurs anyway, because you have to think about your career and you have to think about how you present yourself and how you're accepted or useful in any industry. So whether you go into a formal business and start employing people or not is irrelevant. You are your own business, so just think that way and you'll get through it. And if you decide you want to grow it and take on the hard yards, be ready, because there will be some severe kicks in the guts. I have a son, he's 29. He decided that, very early on, he wanted his own business. So he got into 2 startups, both tech startups, brilliant and really great concepts. And really, if I'd been in there with him, he probably would have got somewhere. But his partners let him down. Some people have the persistence and the perseverance to get through. Others think it's a great daydream and don't commit fully. And so you've really got to, if you're going to take on a partner, make sure that they're in there for the long term and have got your back.
Leading on from this, can I ask you what you think are the most important skills to have as an entrepreneur?
Definitely resilience. Yeah. Because the buck stops with you, like we were saying before. You have to be the person that fixes everything if it breaks. So you have to be the person that, sure, you get upset when stuff doesn't go well and you get angry and you feel really disappointed, but you're the person who has to get up the next day or the next week and keep persisting. There's no one else to go to and say, well, this is someone else's fault. Like, it doesn't matter whose fault it is in the end. You're the person who has to keep working out how to pay your staff or whatever it is, okay? So it takes a kind of, I think, I'd say that personality that means you can keep going if you encounter problems.
I have over my desk, I have a black belt is a white belt who never gave up. Not because I think I'm particularly skilled, but because I need to be reminded of that persistence and be reminded that even, on those days when you don't feel like you're really doing much, if you do a little bit, you're kind of getting towards that goal. What do you think, Leanne?
Yeah, I think it's about belief in what you're doing and why you're doing it. There's so much purpose behind being an entrepreneur, and I know I've already got my next 4 businesses lined up. I'm just waiting for this one to either flop or succeed so that I can get on with the next one. But they all stem from some serious purpose, and as long as that purpose drives you, I think it helps to drive resilience and passion and positivity, because unfortunately you have to kind of be the one who goes, that's okay, let's get on with it, everybody, every day, which can be challenging, but yeah, it's so unbelievably rewarding, but not everybody is cut out to be an entrepreneur. Some people are just, they don't have the risk profile, or they don't, maybe they're a bit afraid of the way that the flexibility that is required, I think. But yeah, you'll know. My husband and I joke, in our vows, at our wedding we said, I will always plot and scheme with you. And what that meant was that when, other couples went for brunch at the beach, they would talk about their house or their dog or whatever, and we would be like, what about this idea? What if we did it this way? Maybe we could try incorporating this. And that's kind of just, you just know. Yeah.
I heard from a venture capitalist last week at Airtree Ventures, because Australia doesn't have an awful lot of investment, but it does have some pretty amazing investment. And one of the things that he said, having listened to 2,000 startups pitch, was that most entrepreneurs feel like they can never be employed afterwards. Like, you get very invested with what you're doing and you feel like you've almost skilled yourself up so much that no one could ever employ you again, right? Because you've got really high expectations of your job. It's like, hey, I want my job to be infinitely flexible, really fun, filled with purpose. I want it to make money, I want to have fun every single day. If I choose not to go to work, that's okay. Like, there's just, so much that you kind of build up around being in that business.
I think comment I'll make. When I was not much older than you, I read a book called The E-Myth, and it's written by a guy called Michael Gerber. Now, he's an interesting guy in himself, but the E-Myth is about technicians who are complaining about working for an idiot. And so they leave and start a business and then later realise they're working for a bigger idiot themselves. And because once you go into that corridor or into that labyrinth, you are the madwoman in your head, right? You will just work your guts out. So there's no going and having a break. You just have to turn up every day. You have to be committing to deadlines. You have to be, solving the problems that you promised. And, it can be really rewarding when it happens, and most times it does if you're doing your job properly. But there'll be percentages of time where the suppliers let you down, or one of your staffs let you down, or the weather's against you or something, and you just feel sick because you've got to actually own the problem and the fact that you couldn't keep your commitment. And that hurts, and it is a bit like money too, sort of like some of you may like the idea of being in business, but you may have an underlying value system that doesn't like asking for money. Well, goodness me, you can't be in business if you can't ask for the value that you're delivering to be paid back to you so you can put it to good purpose. So, get it straight in your head whether you are someone who can do that and front up and ask for the money for the work that you do or not.
Or find a great business partner like I have who does that.
Can I just add, though, you don't have to know all of this now. You don't have to know any of this now. You don't have to know if this is your personality now. Like, none of us started this when we were, I don't think, from listening to the talks, that we started this when we were 18. So, just keep your mind open as you're going through your career. This could happen to you at any time. It doesn't have to be also the confidence. When you look at people giving talks now, that's the confidence that they've built up over 20 years of giving talks and running businesses. It's not necessarily the confidence they had when they were 18. So don't feel like you have to be ready right at this moment. But if you are, brilliant, go and do it.
Yeah, and it was so exciting to hear that some of you are even thinking of this, because I literally, I think we were talking before, my first job was working in a sandwich shop after doing a science degree. So, it couldn't have been further from anything remotely to do with business. Anybody else got questions for the panel here? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask the panellists about their purpose. Like, obviously, each of you have found a real niche. There's so many things you all could have chosen to do. So just any comments on how to narrow down to the one thing that you've decided to focus on would be helpful.
I think find what you're good at would be my answer.
Do you want to answer yours?
I have 3 co-founders, and I think we all love our business for different reasons. I actually really believe, even though I'm not the product designer, I actually really believe in the technical aspect of it, mainly because I've seen the wastage in industry, and it's disgusting. It's so unbelievable what we do to this world on a daily basis in interest of basic consumerism, which sounds like I'm a massive greenie. I'm not really. I still drink bottled water if I have to. But yeah, I really actually believe that this technology, if we can get it to a point where it is multi-purpose enough and widely accepted enough, that it will disrupt a lot of that, and it will make a huge difference in the world. So that kind of gets me out of bed in the morning. But the others love kids, and some of it's just, the geeky part of it. So I think we all come at it for different reasons.
I'll just very quickly say, because I can see other questions waiting, I don't think you do have to find your one thing. I know this is kind of controversial, and lots of people in entrepreneur say, oh, this is their big, one thing. It's definitely not my only one thing. I think you can tell from my talk, I'm still an astrophysicist, and in my spare time I like to do other things. I don't have a lot of spare time right now, but it definitely doesn't have to be your only one thing. It can be one thing that you love enough to work that hard at. That's what it has to be. It doesn't have to be the only thing.
I think at the core of me, there's a couple of strong reasons. Firstly, fundamentally, I'm a problem solver. I see problems, I want to fix them. I was once upon told by my father that if I could see a problem, I actually owned that problem. And so therefore, I guess I've always wanted to fix problems that I see. The other part of me is having grown up on the farm and in the country, sort of made me very sensitive to wanting to protect the environment and value sustainability. And so I use mapping technologies to map and manage the world, to manage the planet better. And if that's managing how disease outbreaks are dealt with, how agribusinesses can benefit and understand how their crops are going or how their cattle are going, or dealing with infrastructure to reduce risks and save lives, in terms of emergency services, and that's where we'll put our effort. So the why is about mapping and managing the world better. I love data, and the better the quality the data, the better the quality answers that we get for the questions that we have. And so those things all drive. For my husband, he just loves the hardware, he loves the tech, so it's all about combining tech with ideas, solving problems, and making sure that our customers and the community are enabled.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Hi, I'm trying to put myself back in the head of the 15-year-old, 16-year-old me, which was a long time ago. And I would have found a lot of what you're saying just completely terrifying, because I just wanted to be a scientist. Yeah, I just wanted to be a scientist, and I was going to be a research scientist. And the idea of doing business, I thought, this is nonsense, I'll never do it. And I went off and did a degree and a PhD. And I remember even at uni, they tried to make us do courses in accounting and marketing and communications on the side. And I just ignored all of those. Those are the courses that I barely passed, because I knew I was just going to be a brilliant astrophysicist, and I would never have to do that stuff. And then I actually became an astrophysicist and realised that you have to be able to do a budget and market your work and promote your work. And even though I was a pure scientist, those entrepreneurial skills would have come in really useful, and I was rubbish at them because I never paid attention to it. Sort of what I'm getting at in a roundabout way was I was talking to my students at morning tea, and they were quite intimidated by the idea of being an entrepreneur. And I said, it's not an all or nothing. It's not just about having a business or nothing else. There's skills that enrich a science or a research career or whatever. I'm a teacher now, but entrepreneurial skills are really helpful in my teaching as well. So I don't know if you have something to say about that.
Well, I just think it's a great point. Yeah, and the other thing I think is, you don't stop being terrified. I'm terrified sitting up here. I'm just used to it, like Tara says. And I'm terrified that, my business will face challenges in the next 2 years that I won't be able to do. But, it's just, you think about it on a day-to-day basis, it's kind of fun. So it's just kind of, keeping that perspective in, just, doing a little bit of what you love.
Your comment is basically like a summary of talks I give to high school students about, and university students about the skills they need to transition from science to industry and so on. They're very much, those skills are in common. I would say for me, I was never interested in business. This was not something I was planning on doing. Absolutely not. I've always been very academic, very socialist, very university, basically. This came about because the opportunity, like we saw the opportunity when it evolved. It wasn't something like I was trying to do. And we almost said we sort of accidentally started a business because we didn't really like the idea of making money. And that was, I still don't, actually. But what we realised is something that was said just before, was that it's just about putting value on what you're doing. And so, for example, we've been using some of, the fact that we now have a sustainable way of running a business means that we've been able to set up this program in Cambodia where we're teaching kids to code and have launched the first Khmer-only coding course free to everyone in Cambodia, right? That's like random and not really related to being profitable as a business, but it's something that the business has enabled us to do. So for me, it's just like when I switched over was when we started reading about it and realised a business is just a model for making a sustainable idea. And over about a 2-year period, my academic self became comfortable with that. And so all the sales and marketing stuff, I agree, you do a bit as a scientist. Every time you give a talk, you're pitching your science. It's not as like the way marketing people do it. Scientists would hate that idea. But there's certainly a core in it that is communicating your results to people. And there's a core in marketing that is communicating your product to people. And so for me, I could see that commonality that made it okay to start a business. But I definitely don't think it's something, that's why from my point of view, this doesn't have to be something you're passionate about from, when you're a student or when you're a uni student or when you're a scientist. It's just, something that can happen in your life.
Can I'd just like to add something, and that is, over the years, I've discovered one thing. It's not about the money. I mean, like Tara, we might do infrastructure jobs, but that's so we can do biosecurity work with local government that have no money, so that they can protect the environment and take care of weeds and make sure they don't get out of control and destroy the planet. There's a lot of things. So money is good. But I guess the key point I want to make is that money is just an amplifier. It's a volume control. If you have a lot of money and you're an asshole, you'll just be a bigger asshole. I'm sorry. But if you are a good person and you want to do good and you have a lot of money and you're able to generate money through your business, you can do a lot of good. And I guess that's the fundamental differentiator. Money is a good thing in the right hands. It's a bad thing in the wrong hands.
I just want to say you've got such an interesting career pathway yourself, right? And you're just doing good in a different way. It's just a different way of kind of finding your way of sort of fulfilling that purpose. And if you have a sense of, I'm fulfilling that purpose, then you're kind of partway along the journey. I think we've got time for about 2 more questions. Yeah.
So obviously you've named resilience as one of the main things that you need. Has there ever been a point in your business where something's got in the way or something's happened that's made you kind of lose hope and made you want to stop? And how did you overcome that?
Yes, when we ran out of money, we encountered the typical problem of a small business with big contracts with big organisations that are very slow to pay. So we had the entire salary of our team of 10 people depending on a payment for a contract that hadn't come through. I was in tears virtually every day for a long period of time trying to sort that out, and got to the point where I said to my partner, I'm quitting, I can't, there's no way I can do this unless we have money, and anyone else running the finances of this business would quit in this situation. We managed to sort it out, obviously, that's why I'm here. But absolutely, I was ready to walk away from it at that point.
I think I'm going to answer both this last question and this one a little bit. I know this sounds all very scary, but I think one of the biggest problems with our system is that it makes us all afraid of failure. And one of the biggest skills or greatest qualities of being an entrepreneur is if you can resign yourself to the fact that failure is positive. And so that's one of the reasons why I think most entrepreneurs would say, oh my God, do it now, do it while you're young, because if you fail, what is it, a couple of grand, you know, you're still living with your mum and dad, what's the big deal? Whereas in the situation that we are all in, actually, because I think all three of us started our businesses when we had just had our first children, why, I don't know, there's some nesting correlation, something. You know, for us, it's like failure is doom and gloom, it's fire and brimstone, and I think mine was definitely money as well. We had been down a long, long path trying to avoid going into the horrendous environment of capital raising in Australia, which I think you've already touched on is tricky. So we'd gone down a long path with individual investors trying to sort of work around that so that we could build out our product, and then it all fell through when we only had 6 days of cash in the bank. And we had to go and pull in contracts, and it was horrible thinking, oh my God, I have a mortgage and a baby, what the hell am I going to do about it? But the way that you pick yourself up is that you come back to, why am I here? What is my alternative? My alternative is going back to working for a big, dirty industry full of guys who, you know, I get to learn a lot of stuff and it's really cool and I got promoted and all that sort of stuff, but I don't get to do what gets me out of bed every day, and never once have I thought, I don't want to be doing this. I never once have I thought, I wish I just had a normal day job, even when I was in the depths of despair. I just remembered what my alternatives were and thought, nah, stuff it, this is too fun. I'm going to have to keep going. Let's just get it sorted.
It's making the world of work seem great, isn't it? Did you want to, one more last comment, and then we'll take up one more question?
Just going to say, it's resilience is important. I mean, you will get through it if you have a big enough why. I was talking about your purpose. You'll have an inner voice. I mean, there have been times where I've just gone, oh, too much. But then I try to go. I try to walk away, and that little voice inside me holds me fast and keeps me, you know, going in the direction that I know is right. And then amazing things happen. It's extraordinary, but you also find out who you are. I mean, actually, the best sort of example I can give you of multitasking in business is when you're breastfeeding baby, doing a tech support call and working on the computer. So it's amazing what you can do when you are totally committed. And it's a good thing to be that committed. But, you know, if it's not for you, you'll know. It'll be okay. There we go.
And we have a last question over here. In the middle of the row, back there, yeah.
I was just wondering, when you say that you want us to start now if we have ideas, but how do you suggest that we find, because you all started after you had savings from previous businesses, how do we find savings when we've never worked before? And did you have backup plans for what you would do if it did fail?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. You know, having something really helps. So, I mean, I started my business 5 years ago with $7,000, and that was thanks to a redundancy payment, right? So that was the worst thing that happened to me. I lost my job, but I had enough money that I was like, all right, if I can't do this for 2 weeks at least, or maybe even 4, I've got some money to live, and it's tough. That's why I think, you know, going to a startup, getting some kind of experience just being in that industry is a great thing. And do you know what? You'll find that you'll segue into a job. I think we're hearing from Kate, Deb Nola's intern who's now working for the business. I think you kind of find that there's good ways to segue in and learn from other people's mistakes.
Absolutely. One of the books I read when I was starting out, The Lean Startup, they introduced this idea, minimum viable product. This is your path to starting with no savings and with no backup. You can just say, as an example, you wanted to start a dog walking business or something, right? You can get interest in that just by putting up a web page and counting how many people click on, yes, I'd like to, buy this service, even before you have a service. So that means that because of the way that we can do this, that any person like you can use social media, can set up websites. If you don't know how to set up website, do our coding course on HTML. But, because you can do that yourself more than ever before in the past, you can literally start with something that's tiny. And then you only grow it if you get interest. If nobody has interest in what you're doing and you've tried to get it out there, then maybe you choose a different idea. Do you know what I mean? So you can experiment with your idea. Unless your idea is an expensive medical device or something like that, where you literally need thousands and thousands of dollars, and then you definitely need investment and a university and blah, blah, blah. But if your idea is something you could do, you can start tiny and get interest and then grow it into something bigger. So have a read of that book. I thought there's lots of things I don't like about the startup world, but this was a really cool one. Start with a little idea and try it out and see if it's got legs, and then grow it. And if you can prove to people it's got legs, you might be able to borrow $1,000 from someone you know. Do you know what I mean? So then you can start it. Yeah.
So that was called The Lean Startup.
Yeah, Lean Startup. It's a very good book. It's an excellent book, all about failing fast, So if you're going to fail fast and with little ramification on the rest of your world. So that's important. There was something really important I was going to say.
I just have to say I agree completely with Tara. There's more opportunity for this generation than there ever have been before.
Just a quick idea that flew in, flew out, sorry, but it's back again. Crowdfunding. I mean, you are in a sensational time of your lives. There has never been before an opportunity to start something. If you've got a great idea, you can crowdfund it. I mean, that was never available when we started out, It's really cool. So that's something to think about too.
Fantastic. Leanne, any closing comments?
I'm jealous of you guys. I'm excited for you. You have no idea how valuable you are because you are infinite possibilities at the moment. And I can tell you that everybody wants to hire a female coder or physicist. We actually didn't even hire coders, we hired physicists. Who happen to be brilliant.
Physicists can code too.
Brilliant coders. They're so creative, it's unbelievable. Yes, and, as someone who I feel confident that I brought a lot to the business stuff you can learn, giving yourself some skills in a beautifully logical framework that teaches you a breadth of technology and the confidence to walk into a room and say, well, I'm a freaking physicist. What are you going to question my logic for? You know what I mean? Like,
let's all start.
The world is your oyster. Study what you're passionate in. Enjoy it. Don't think that has to be what you do for the rest of your life, because as you've seen, even people who go all the way through to a PhD, they divert into other things, and starting a business is just another way of you being able to explore that passion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Leanne. Please join me in thanking our amazing panel.